There's no competence in this president. There never has been, and there was never intended to be. This president is a joker who was played upon the American people with a lot of drug money behind it, and he was never intended that he would be competent. He is totally incompetent. He's not a man of intellect. He's a man who's trained to babble, and he's been taught the recipes to babble. He has no comprehension of what he's talking about. But however, he is the elected president of the United States. And you cannot have coups at this time because the dangers already, there are too many threats of coup d'etats already around. And the system is set up for overthrows of governments, including the United States government. For example, right now, as you may recall, that when certain interests in London and the United States set up what became known as 9/11, as an operation run as a Saudi-British operation with cooperation of certain people inside the United States. And that's documented. That's a fact. This thing was funded by a British-Saudi operation in which the ambassador of Saudi Arabia to the United States was a key figure in preparing what became known as 9/11. At the time, there were many indications of what that was, but this was quickly hushed up. And the investigations, even as far as they went, were blocked. Certain facts were blocked out. But the evidence was always there, and all you had to do was to look in the right place. And it's there. It came from an alliance between Saudi Arabia and London, which financed and planned the entire operation, and the Saudi ambassador to the United States at that time was a key figure in setting up the operation. Now, this information was accessible to the incumbent government of the United States at that time, but it was hushed up. And something else which had been intended was done instead. The intention was to destroy this government. How? From the inside. And you had an idiot who was an unreconstructed drug addict, a cocaine freak, who had avoided military service in Vietnam by being co-opted into the Texas Air Guard. The Texas Air Guard didn't want him, but the Bush family forced him upon the Texas Air Guard. This fellow continued his habit, which included cocaine, a serious cocaine habit, and the head of the Texas Air Guard and company shipped this guy out to another state where he was supervised by a couple of military officials to go through drug treatment for cocaine addiction. And he went through a year of training in his cure for cocaine addiction, which didn't work. Right? So we had a coke addict who entered the White House as President of the United States, an unreconstructed coke addict, and who just could not drink alcohol except near beer. And he was nothing. Mean character, a mean little jerk, but no brains to speak of. The father was not too bright either. The brains in the family had been used up by the grandfather, who had been a key man in putting Hitler into power in Germany. And you're dealing with this kind of process, Anglo-American process all the way through, still to the present day.
If you tell me that building this whole country and spending 350 billion out of 400 billion, that we had misused or got corrupted with 50 billion, I'll tell you yes, but I'll take that any time. what I'm trying to tell you is, so what? We did not invent corruption.
Saudi Arabia is allied with the United States in the war on terror, but the kingdom's critics say it is playing both sides, siding with America while continuing to promote Islamic fundamentalism around the world. Osama bin Laden himself is a Saudi, as is the man sitting next to him in this videotape. And if the Saudi royal family is with America, some question where the rest of the country falls. Fareed Zakaria writes in Newsweek, quote, "If elections had been held last month in Saudi Arabia with King Fahd and Osama bin Laden on the ballot, I would not bet too heavily on His Royal Highness's fortunes." Prince Bandar bin Sultan is the Saudi ambassador to the United States. Prince Bandar, thank you, sir, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Chris.
You're great to come on. You were watching the program Friday night, and you wanted to take issue with something we reported. I believe it was from a Andrea Mitchell report that showed that in your country, the televised report of the videotape of Osama bin Laden bragging, in a sense, about his knowledge beforehand of the horrible destruction of September 11th was not really broadcast on your official Saudi Arabian television, but only the criticisms made of it. And then I saw in the paper this weekend that the Associated Press is reporting that your government has still not decided whether to show the tape of Osama bin Laden bragging about blowing up the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon. What do you make of that decision, and why does your government still not want to show that tape which incriminates Osama bin Laden?
Chris, I think if these reports are true, shame on Saudi Arabia. Truth is, on the day of the airing of the tape of bin Laden, it was shown in Saudi Arabia 3 times, on the main news and twice afterward. 3 times.
Well, why did the official spokesman for Saudi Arabian television say over the weekend that they had no plans to air it?
Again, they are not plans to air it again, but they aired it 3 times when it first came out. That's number one. Number two, that late afternoon that day, we issued a statement that can be more stronger. But more important than all of this, common sense tells us that Bin Laden is not big news in Saudi Arabia as a terrorist. You know why? Because we knew he was a terrorist before the 11th of September. He was stripped from his nationality, his people were chased, his people were behind the attack that killed 5 American soldiers in Saudi Arabia 4 or 5 years ago. When we captured them, we tried them under Sharia law, we executed them. Guess what? Western media said we did something terrible. We're killing dissidents. You know, those dissidents, when we chased them in Saudi Arabia,
right,
the followers of Osama bin Laden, they don't run away to Cairo or Tehran or Damascus. They escaped to London, Paris, Frankfurt, America. On the 10th of September, most of those people were called dissidents. On the 12th, they were called terrorists.
Well, let me tell you why they're terrorists, because 15 people from your country blew up our World Trade Center and our Pentagon. If 15 Americans had gone to Saudi Arabia and blown up your iconic places like the World Trade Center and the equivalent of the pyramids or something like that over there, you would be wanting to know why those people did it, and you'd want our government to tell us why they did it. Has your government dug into who these 15 people are and why they did it to us, what they did to us on September 11th?
But, Chris, you just proved my point. You cannot take yes for an answer. I'm saying we called them terrorists before 11 September. You called them dissident. After the 11th of September, the same people became terrorists to you. You've switched their category from dissident to terrorist. For us, they are terrorists. When you say Bin Laden in Saudi Arabia, people say, yes, that renegade, that bad guy. Therefore, Bin Laden or the 15 people who were in the airplane, or people who follow them or support them, they are not just terrorists after what they did on the 11th of September. They are evil, Chris.
But if they're evil and they're dissidents in your country, why don't they blow up your country, their own country? Why do they come here and blow up ours?
They tried to do that in Saudi Arabia many times. Touch wood that they didn't succeed as big as they did in the United States, but they attacked people, they exploded bombs in Saudi Arabia. So we were after them. We were after them. And
what we don't understand is why Bin Laden, who comes from a royal family, was like coming from the Rockefellers in this country. All right, it's a good comparison, isn't it?
It is a good comparison,
okay,
but
so,
a renegade one.
But he's a renegade.
Yes.
But why doesn't his family go after him? Why doesn't the family? Why don't you freeze the assets of all the wealthy Saudis who are giving money to these types of organizations?
This is the tragedy, and you have to forgive me. The American media is either lazy or ignorant. This man, his family froze his assets. They disavowed of him. They disowned him. The government stripped him from his nationality. And I want to question the report you mentioned that if there was an election in Saudi Arabia between him and the king, he would have won. You know something? That is fancy talk. It's lovely.
Because, of course, other spy rings have been caught in the US in the last decade, most notably the so-called dancing Israelis who were arrested shortly after 9/11. They were seen celebrating the collapse of the Twin Towers.
Trace Gallagher. Thank you, Trace.
That Israelis who worked at the World Trade Center were warned by the Israeli government to take the day off on 9/11.
And also the alleged art student spy ring, which was rounded up in 2002. And they, again, were supposedly Israeli Mossad agents. Now, both of these spy rings weren't prosecuted. And, in fact, the stories have been quietly removed from things like Fox News websites and things. And the spies, or alleged spies, were just quietly deported back to Israel. There was no political hoo-ha. There was no media hoo-ha. And there was no...
The United States is committed to Israel's security. We are committed to that special bond.